Hello, and welcome to Build the Millennium Falcon with yours truly, Azarmorph. In this episode, we're going to cover issue 3 of Build the Millennium Falcon. What I would like to say is that before we start getting into the magazine, as we always do first and foremost, what I'd like to say is that I had a little look through some other material and couldn't find anything that would really add to this issue, to this time round in this episode, which is a compliment to the magazine developers, that's for sure, because I felt it actually covered the elements off quite well, and even taught me a few bits and pieces I didn't know, which is why we want to get these. So enough of that, and let's get on with the magazine. So if we turn over, we see that we've got one of the two most iconic fighters within the Star Wars universe, excluding the Millennium Falcon, it has to be said, the other one being the TIE fighter used by the Empire. So this is the Rebels Choice Fighter, which is the X-Wing, as you can see here in the picture, which I'm pointing to right now. This one shows the point where the X-Wing actually deploys its wings, because when they fly out of combat, the wings are shut, but they open up as they fly through. It's also got some details on it here, for example, the length being 12.5 metres, and the maximum speed, 1,050 kilometres in any atmosphere. And that would get you to work quick, wouldn't it, really? But it's very good. It's got the information about the X-Wing. Obviously, we'll probably come across a few more bits as we go. But if we turn over, we've got one of the key pilots of the X-Wing, which happens to be Luke Skywalker himself. He also used this to travel to meet Yoda and start his Jedi training. If you look down here, we've got a picture down here of the X-Wings doing what they do best, which is flying past the defences of the Death Star. So much so that forced Vader to take out 3 TIE fighters, including himself, to deal with the threat. Very nearly did so at the end of the film, which is so good. So if we then turn over, we're now at Bespin's settlement. It does seem to do this. It seems to cover off some ships, and then it goes into a location, which is good. It gives you a bit of variety in the magazine, which is really nice to see. So in Bespin's settlement, was Cloud City is the key one that we all know. Again, Cloud City is here. Yeah, see if you can see it there. Yep. Which is right there. Cloud City was won by Lando Calrissian in a gambling bet. He took over ownership, and from what I'm reading in this magazine, he seemed to have done quite well, although he did bring in gambling and other things, but it did attract tourism to it. Cloud City and the adjoining, there's 2 other cities and other infrastructure that fed into it. But Cloud City kind of kept itself well under the radar, as it had to, being on the planet from the Empire. And we'll get back to that in a minute. But this was actually set up by a Lord Fig, if I've got that right. A Lord Fig set this up because they found it had something interesting on it. That being Tibana gas, which is used for hyperdrives. But as you can see, it wasn't the most hospitable gas planet. And again, it comes back to the detail here. The gas planet was size is 118,000 kilometres in diameter, so it's not a small planet in any shape, way or form. However, the core of the planet, which is about 6,000 kilometres in diameter, was a bit smaller, obviously. However, that was mostly a metal planet and not very hospitable at all. In fact, the lower levels of this planet were predominantly not suitable for any life form due to the basis of pressure and toxicity of the gases. However, there was a 30-kilometre deep band around the gas giant, which is about 150 kilometres below that of space, where you could set up flying cities or islands, if you whatever one you want to call them, which the Cloud City was one of. Now, as I said earlier, the Cloud City managed to keep itself out of the Empire's sights, even though it was smuggling this gas for the hyperdrive system. But what was even more astonishing is that it was actually doing the spin-sealed gas version, which is a much more condensed version and much more valuable. They were managing to smuggle that under the same labels, shall we say, of the ordinary Tabana gas. So, yeah, basically they were smuggling a lot out, and it made it profitable to actually have these massive flying cities, which wouldn't have been cheap in the first place. So how did the Empire find out about it? Well, if you watch the episode Empire Strikes Back, you will know that the Millennium Falcon turned up to get repairs and such like after fleeing off. And basically, as you can see, when the Empire turned up, our good friend Han Solo was used as a test piece by Vader to carbon freeze Luke Skywalker. So he used Han Solo as a test and then gave him to Boba Fett, who'd actually trailed them to the Cloud City. And from that, the story moves on, basically. He didn't get like Luke Skywalker, but he did get Han Solo, which then falls on into Return of the Jedi. So enough about that, we'll move on to the next part, which is the rear cockpit control panels. It basically goes on about how the panels came together. We've got a nice black and white picture here that shows the console again, and this is quite a well-known picture of four of the main characters in front of the cockpit. This is when they were arriving at the small moon. That's no small moon. And it turns out it wasn't, it was Desta. But as you can see, it was actually quite well hidden behind the seats and everything in there. But it was still good detail, So if we roll over the page, we'll see some more. This is another photo shoot of the interior of the cockpit. This is where Princess Leia and Han Solo are getting a bit close in the cockpit just before a nice little aliens stuck themselves to the glass because the comet they were on wasn't stable. You'll know which film that's from, I'm sure. Anyway, we've got the dressing of the cockpit here, which talks about the elements within the cockpit. Some of those being the seats here, which you can see the rear of. Those are supposedly Mark IV Martin Baker ejector suits, made for basically reconditioned for the film. They also use things from Porsche 911s, and they also use Volvo parts, etc. Not new parts, it was all scrap, because that's what they did. They went out and bought some scrap metal and components to stick in to make the console. And I think, as you can see by this photograph here, if I bring it up, they did a pretty good job of it. Pretty good job. But then we go on to the console again. It shows the rear console. It shows some key components at the back. This element here is blown up down here, and this is the nav computer, if I've got it from reading that right. So the nav computer's here, and then it goes through reinforced bulks, data scanners, and all those other hyperdrive, etc., as you would expect. So it's all detailed out in the magazine, which is really quite good and very helpful. But this is the part we're getting to, if I've got this right. Yes, it's the building element. Now we're coming on to the parts and the building of the machine itself. So I'm just going to slide this over a little bit so that we can get that a bit centered. And we're going to talk about the components that come with this. It's not a huge amount of components that we've got in this episode. What we've got here is the first part, which is the outer hull plating. There we go. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same as I did in the last episode, because I thought that quite worked, is I'm going to zoom in for the parts. So we'll get to the detail when we get to that of these components. But if we have a look at this outer hull plating first and foremost, what I'm going to do then is I'm actually going to bring in what we made in the last episode, which is, if I turn it up that way, the metal sections plus the TP1, top plating one, because these obviously go together. Obviously there'll be metalwork at some point that'll link these two. The mail will come up. They'll be able to link these two together, but at the moment we don't have that because they haven't arrived yet. So what I would say here is I'm quite intrigued with this because we've got lips here and we've got lip here, which helps join these together because that kind of hooks itself in, if I can get that right, to the TP2, which is this piece that's been delivered. Now, if I show it, you can see it's being held up by those lips, which kind of gives it extra mobility, but there we go. And then we get even more exciting because of this little curved element here, because TP2 slots into TP3 at some future state, which is the gun component we've got. Now, we can now get to see the width of this lovely beast, because it's obviously coming out to this metal element here, but it's getting to be quite some size, isn't it? I mean, it's like I've got a round table here, and it's getting to be quite filled up when I put those two bits together. So we're now going to take those parts away, and then place this upper hull up there, so we can have a look at that. The next parts, 2 and 3, is the door to and from the cockpit. I've already put the label in. I'll stick it, I should say, the label. Label's not a label, Azarmorph, come on. It's the sticker. I've put the sticker in, again, good quality. Stuck it in the back. It's got some holes at the back here, which is Intriguing me. But it's all stuck in. It took a little. It is quite fiddly because you don't want to get in the sides. Again, we will get to show you the detail when we get to the close-ups of using this. Because if I slide this back over here, you'll see that we have got an element of fitting it together. So we'll cover the detail, the close-up detail, in a second. So I'll put that there. The next parts, which you're really not going to see at this range, are the, what they're calling them is the control yokes. Joysticks is what I would call them, but no, the control mechanism, just as you would see in any plane or anything. Again, we'll get to the detail in a second. And they've also got, which you won't see for love nor money, there's 2 of them there, believe it or not. These are the throttle levers, so they're all good. And then we'll get on to the next part, which is the seats, as you can see here. Now, these look quite red in the magazine, but if I put the 2 Han Solo and Chewbacca seats, shall we call them, the 2 front seats in place, you can see that they're not as red as the ones in the magazine. However, these are still the key ones that people were mentioning about repainting, which then opened up the whole discussion about actually repainting the model once people had it. And that's had me thinking about it as well. But for now, we'll keep them in their condition, well, keep them as they are just now. And then the last pieces are the 2, well, these are the Mark IV injector suits, really. There we go. I'll stick them there, which you can't see, but if I put them up there, you'll probably see them a bit better. Yes. They look like panda seats. They're white and black, pretty straightforward. Again, if we decide to do something with them in the future, we'll do something in the future. But for now, they are as they are. So those are the parts that we've got in this episode to go through. We will be bringing in other parts of the cockpit for this. But what I'm going to do now is I'm now going to set up a close-up shot. We're now up to the close-up. I've dropped the camera and we're zoomed in on these little bits and pieces. Hopefully you can see the throttle controls a little bit better. Obviously, when we start putting this together, I'll bring them up a bit closer as well. So the first thing is to have a look at the back door, which goes in the rear console system. I'm just going to see if we can tilt that. You can just make out, I think, there, in the light that we have here. There at the back of this, that where we've got these 3 black stripes, you can actually see a black stripe and a panel. So it actually has got little bits of paneling detail at the back of here. Plus also the little decal at the top, which kind of shows the controls for the back door, which is all good. So the first part we put together is really hard. We basically get hold of the rear console panel from the previous episode, and then we'll drop the door into place, like so. So it's all nice and flat. Yep, there we go. And there we go. We've got a nice door sat in the back. And then what we've got is a little bit, I think you can just make it out. Yes, you can. We've got a little bit down the back here, which is out so that everything floats together. I believe that the base of the cockpit section will slot on top of the door, so it all kind of links together quite nicely. So there we go. Nice and straightforward for that piece. We'll just put that over there for the moment. Now let's bring back in the base of the spacecraft, as you can see here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to predominantly hold it with this hand at the moment, because I'm going to try... it's not going to really... You've got black on black there, really. Which isn't overly helpful. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold that there for the moment. And I'm actually going to grab one of the rear seats. Because the rear seats, as with the red seats, actually it's easier to see on the red seats, you've got that C section of the material at the bottom. Same thing for the black ones here. You've got the same kind of C section on there. And then what you do is you basically, what I'm going to do is I'm just basically going to slide, I think you can just make that out, slide that on, and then that holds it in place quite nicely. Oh, he says. Yeah, you can't make these things up really. But if I put that in and slot it into place, obviously you want to glue these at some stage. And then if I grab the other one and do the same thing again, trying to get it into the right angle, there we go. You've got the 2 back seats in place, like our show. Yes, we do. And then I'm going to do the same again with these red ones. Just slide them onto these black nibs that are sticking out. And then last seat. So now we've got seats in our cockpit, which is quite handy, really. Quite handy indeed. And we'll sit, and there we go. So these are the Mark IVs, and these are the seats. Slightly strange that these seats are both the same height, because in the film, Chewbacca and Han Solo were actually at the same height. So this seat must have been lower to allow Chewbacca to sit in it, but there we go. We're fine, minor details, minor details. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to stick these little throttle controls into place. I don't think you can really see it. I'm going to try that zoomy in thing. There you go. You can see it nicely there. So what I'm going to now do is I'm going to now try and attempt to drop these into place. Again, what we've got, let's get the light on this right, you've got some little holes about here. That's actually coming to focus quite nicely there. I'm quite pleased. So now if we drop that one into there, and then swivel it around, because the guard would be on the inside because of the way you'd kind of be controlling it, like so. And then if we grab the next one, and we drop that one into place here, and then swivel it around. Again, we'll stick these in at a later date, so I'll have to put these in my tin where the screws are. I want to keep it safe. Now, you can just make out here and here, there's some holes. And these holes are for the controllers. Now, I think these controllers are made of metal, not plastic. The throttle controls are made of plastic. So if I just slot this controller into place and then rotate, so that you can see one in place, and there we go. And then what I'll do with the other one is the same thing again. I will try to slot that in, and we do. And that one's, these are just going to keep rotating, aren't they? And there we go, we've got the cockpit coming together quite nicely, I'd say. There we go. I like that. I like that a lot. Now what we're going to then do is we're going to grab this back panel and put this back. We're going to fit, how many times we pull this back and put it back together again. And if we just slot that into place, like so. Now there we're getting to really see the cockpit. The camera's liking this area. So this is the sweet spot for the camera, so that's good. So as you can see, it's all coming together. And then the last thing, but definitely not least, is that we had the control panel from previous episode. If I now slot that in, as I tell you, these things are just going to fly out everywhere until they're glued in, as just case proven. So drop that in there again. If I now put that onto the front again, then we really have moved forward. I'm trying to do this at a really bizarre angle. But there we go. That's the purpose of filming. And there we go. Console coming together. Like that. Yep, I do. I hope you like it too. So there we go. That's the end of issue 3. Quite a bit shorter than the other ones because they've been both 25 minutes. But again, I think it's right to do one issue per episode because then I think it's just the way to go. Obviously, if you've got a different opinion, by all means, let me know. So I think all it leaves me to do is to say thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and may the Force be with you, of course. And until next time, stay safe.